Now, no matter how you feel about the Star Wars prequels, it cannot be denied that there are some fans who love them and some fans who hate them, as well as some who fall somewhere in between those two extremes. In fact, it's probably the most divisive topic amongst the entire fan base. Well, maybe until the sequel trilogy is done, that is. But no matter how you feel about them, and I personally do enjoy the prequels, though I can admit they are not perfect movies, one thing that cannot be denied is they are a part of Star Wars, and a part of the main Star Wars saga in particular. And no, I'm not trying to be an ass here and say, haha, you have to deal with them if you happen to be one of those people who can't stand them. Because you can, if you want, just ignore them and say they're not a part of your Star Wars. And that's certainly your prerogative to do so. However, what I'm really trying to ask of those who hate them is, what do you think should be done with them? I mean, over the years, have you learned to accept them as is, even though you don't personally like them? Or have you always felt and always will feel they should be scrapped and maybe even remade? Is it the story you hate, or just the execution of that story? How would you feel if they did get remade, but kept that story intact? Not that that would ever actually happen, mind you. And on the flip side, if you happen to be one of those people who loves the prequels, maybe even more so than the original trilogy, what do you think can or should be done with them so that they can be accepted by more fans? Or do you think they just have to deal with it? Because here's the dilemma Disney and Lucasfilm face. They know almost all fans enjoyed the original trilogy, with some exceptions of course. And they also know that a lot of fans, especially the younger ones who grew up with it, love the prequels, again maybe even more so than the originals, and want more stories from that time period. However, they also know there are a lot of fans who would have zero interest in said stories and would boycott them, if you will. And Disney, at the end of the day, obviously wants to make content that would appeal to the largest amount of people possible. Not only because it makes them more money, but because you also don't want to anger the people making you that money. And no, I'm not saying Lucasfilm under Disney has ignored the prequels entirely, or would ever even adopt such a stance. However, it can't be denied they've given far more love and attention to the original trilogy time period, both with the new novels and comics that have come out recently, as well as with their first two anthology movies. But then we come to the rumored third anthology movie, the Obi-Wan movie, and I say rumored because, well, Disney and Lucasfilm have yet to officially confirm it. Now, if done right, this movie could be the perfect blend of prequel and original trilogy and really start to bridge the gap between the two. And I don't just mean in terms of story, but in terms of how people feel about the prequels. And as someone who likes them and wishes more fans did, that's an exciting prospect. And no, I'm not saying that this one movie could make prequel haters say, you know what, I've been wrong all along, and I love those movies, they're great. But if it could somehow give some of them a greater appreciation, or even just some appreciation for the prequels, then that's a good first step, and might help Disney and Lucasfilm consider more content from that time period, and maybe even someday an anthology movie set during the prequels. Because of all the hate I've heard or read about the prequels in my time, I'm not sure I've ever encountered someone who had a problem with Ewan McGregor's Obi-Wan. In fact, usually people who hate the prequels can admit he was a pretty good Obi-Wan. Now, one idea I've had, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this from both sides, both those who love and hate the prequels, would be to create a special edition of the prequels. And no, I'm not suggesting you alter the movies, and something tells me Disney might not be able to do that even if they wanted to, since it wouldn't shock me if a clause preventing this was put into the contract by George Lucas himself. But rather, you do it in the written form, and create a special edition of the three novels that goes far more into depth about what is happening and covers the things the movie just didn't have time for, especially the political aspect, which a lot of people think hampered the movies. But in my opinion, one of the problems of the prequels is the story was too big for just 3 2-hour and some minute long movies. And it wasn't the inclusion of the politics that hurt the movies, but the fact that they just didn't make any sense, or just weren't explained well enough. For example, in The Phantom Menace, going off just what we learned, or should I say don't learn in the movie itself, why exactly did the Trade Federation set up a blockade around Naboo? Sure, in the opening crawl it said the taxation of trade routes were in dispute for some reason, and we ultimately know Palpatine used the plight of his people to help him become Supreme Chancellor, but we don't really know any more than that, and I for one wish we did because I think it helped the story to know what was going on in the background, if you will. Just why was the taxation of trade routes in dispute? And yes, I know there's a lot of you that think that's the boring part you don't care about, but really, that is the backbone of the whole prequels, the politics behind the scenes, while Anakin's story is and should be at the forefront. Then there's Attack of the Clones, which of the three prequels would be the one helped by far the most by a special edition, because just watching that movie, I have no idea why the Separatists want to leave the Republic, and why I should care if they do. Now, we can infer it stems all the way back from the trade routes in dispute from Episode 1, but for all we know, it doesn't have anything to do with that. And again, knowing that reason helps us care more about the story. Another thing we don't know is why Padme thinks Dooku is trying to kill her at the start of Episode 2, and that really bugs me. Why? Because look at it this way, Dooku is the leader of the Separatist movement, which means, in theory, he just wants to peacefully leave the Republic so the systems he represents can do their own thing. And we know Padme is opposed to the Military Creation Act, so why would Dooku want to have her killed? Why, if you're Dooku, would you assassinate a senator who, in a sense, is helping facilitate a peaceful exit from the Republic for the systems you represent? I mean, if Dooku did have her killed, and it came out he was responsible, you're only going to turn more senators against you and make them in favor of creating an army to fight you. I mean, wouldn't Padme be more suspicious of the senators in favor of the Military Creation Act instead of Dooku? And sure, don't get me wrong here, I understand Dooku wants war, and that part of Newt Gunray's condition for joining the Separatist Alliance is for Senator Amidala to be killed, but Padme doesn't know any of that. Again, from her perspective, she should think Dooku would be happy about her position of not wanting to create an army to fight him. So why exactly does she think he's the one trying to have her killed? And those are just a couple of the many mysteries the special edition novels can answer. And the interesting part here is, the novelization of Episode 3 already has a few more story details in it than the movie does. And even though I love Revenge of the Sith, and it's my favorite of the prequel movies, those little details still help the story quite a bit. So imagine what a semi-rewrite and an expansion of all three books could do for the story of the prequels as a whole. I mean, maybe, just maybe, it could start to change the mind of at least some fans, and open the door for more great stories to be told in this time period, a time period that is truly beloved by many Star Wars fans. Well, that's all I've got for you this time, but like with all my discussion videos, I would love to hear all your thoughts and opinions on this matter. I only ask that you please be respectful here, because obviously this is a sensitive subject amongst the Star Wars community, and people have strong feelings both ways when it comes to the prequels, so please keep it as friendly as possible. We're all fans here after all. And with that said, let me know what you think can or should be done with the prequels. Do you think creating a special edition in the written form is a good idea? Has your opinion of them changed at all over the years, for good or bad? Because, and maybe I'm wrong here, but it seems more people have become accepting of them as time has gone by. Lastly, and I know I keep saying this, I really am going to try to do a follow-up video this time. The main reason I didn't do one for last week's question about whether or not the future of Star Wars should be movies or television is because a majority of people were in agreement that Star Wars will make the move to television, and soon, but that it should never stop making movies. So until next time then, thanks for watching.